I think most people see wooden boat builders as being craftsmen, perhaps artists, or perhaps even engineers. But for me, being a wooden boat builder, more often than not, means being a problem solver. I'm constantly being presented with all sorts of unique problems that I need to find a solution for quickly, efficiently, and effectively. And today's problem is no exception to that. Howdy folks, I'm Mark Rutten. Welcome to Nomad Boatbuilding. Today we're going to try something a little different. We're going to mess around with trying to fiberglass glued-lapstrake planking. We're going to do it with products from the sponsor of this video, West System Epoxies. My client wanted fiberglass in the bottom of his boat, and I explained to him glassing a lapstrake boat is really challenging because these laps, you can't get fiberglass cloth to wrap over these contours. Now my customer has a place over on Camano Island. He wants to keep the boat on the hook, and the beaches everywhere around these parts are rocky and covered in barnacles, so it's pretty rough on a boat that's going to be pulled up on a beach. It's also going to be on the hook, so anything you can do to make the bottom more durable for bottom painting and scraping and such is a good thing. So he wanted glass on the bottom to protect against all of that. However, trying to glass lapstrake is almost impossible. If you used matte, it could sort of do it if you have very soft contours here, but with cloth and sharp contours, it's never going to happen. So I came up with this idea of using fiberglass tape over each plank. This is something I could have done when the planks were flat too, like glass the plank, but I didn't want to add extra tension to the planks as I was installing them because it's a fairly beamy boat and there's enough tension coming around the bow here. I didn't want to add to that. So I thought I would try this. The idea is I'll glass each plank, trim away the excess, and we'll do fillets in between each one to sort of bring it all together. So to that end, I've used fiberglass tape as opposed to a big breadth of cloth because it's got this finished edge. I don't have to worry about this getting all hairy on me as I apply the glass. It's fast to roll out, of course. A little bit of extra cost, but not a ton, I don't think. To make this faster still, I'm going to use peel ply or a release fabric. And what that is, it's this fabric that epoxy doesn't really stick to. So you glass the plank, and while the glass is wet, you apply the release fabric over it, and you apply more epoxy over that, pushing the epoxy through the fabric and into the glass, and it fills out the glass to its surface while preventing the glass from floating off the boat. Once it's all cured, you just simply peel off the peel ply, and it leaves this sort of a slightly textured surface where the glass is filled right up, which is exactly what you want. If you don't use that, you have to reapply epoxy 2, 3, maybe even 4 times to fill out the surface of the cloth. I also feel like that takes a whole bunch of extra time getting set up each time. You have to worry about timing of it, and ideally you want to apply those coats one after the other. And I also feel like I end up with a lot more work trying to sand it out once I'm done. So I've never really tried this before. I haven't worked with peel ply very much. Now these are overlapping. Obviously, I'm not going to glass up over the edge of the plank and bond this to the wrist of the hull. I'm just going to apply glass up until I hit the edge here, and I'll just leave that dry, let it float. Now what I might do is come back a little bit later on, once this is gelled, and just trim that back with a utility knife to the edge of the plank, just to make sure that I don't stick this against the finished boat permanently. I don't know how that's going to go. I just don't want to trim that now because I feel like that's going to give me a headache later on. So I've got my peel ply cut into strips that are just a little bit wider than this, so I can roll those out after this is wet out. So the 879 release fabric, or peel ply as we call it, is a very light 4-ounce cloth, and it's a bit hard to cut because it is so light, but I found electric scissors do a beautiful job of cutting this stuff. And in fact, using this thing for cutting glass, it was a huge game changer compared to farting around with regular scissors and So you're trying to do that with regular scissors without disturbing the whole thing? Impossible. Definitely pick one of these guys up. Now I tried, they got the ones that have that sort of rotary version of electric scissors, electric cutters. I tried those on fiberglass before and they were a total disaster. They did not work worth a damn, but these little snippy ones work great. This was probably about, I don't know, 40 bucks. All right, I will set up a mixing station outside of my paint room where the epoxy normally lives. just for convenience to keep the cans warmer. I should have warmed this epoxy up more. It's just room temperature. I should have put some heat to it earlier on. Now I always pump one pump of resin, then one pump of hardener to keep it the same. Even if I lose count, at least I know hardener, then resin, wherever I stop, it'll still be the proper proportions. I refer to the combination of one pump of resin and one pump of hardener as one shot of epoxy. And as a starting point, I usually use one shot for every 1 square foot of surface area I want to cover. Make sure you give the pump time to rise all the way up. If this resin was warmer, this would come up faster. That's 3. I'm going to go for 10. One shot of 105-207 will saturate 1 square foot of roughly 6-ounce cloth on dry mahogany plywood. That's 4. If I try and do all the resin and then all the hardener, I lose count every time. The second coat will take half as much epoxy as the first, and then the subsequent coats will take half as much again as the previous one. For every square foot of this 9-ounce fiberglass tape, it'll take roughly 2 shots to saturate the cloth and fill out the weave. One of the great things about West System products is that they have really fantastic support. Their application guide is concise and clear and very informative. They have selection guides online that allow you to pick the products that are best suited to the project that you're working on. And of course, they have their technical support line, which will answer any questions or help you problem solve. So go check out all of those resources over at westsystem.com. Okay, now I do my mixing over on the drill press. I make mixing wands out of pieces of coat hanger or any other bit of steel wire for mixing my epoxy. Because I don't want to introduce a ton of air bubbles, I find the drill press is more effective. If I'm just doing a glue up like a bonding joint, I'll just use a wand and a drill, but on the drill press I can set the speed slower and I can just walk away. So I put my wand to the bottom, then I bring it up a hair, lock off the depth, fire it up. And quite often the wand will walk the pot around and get into the corners a little bit. We'll rag to slow it down. And I'll just go away and tackle something else while this is mixing, just to make sure I give it enough time. So I usually grab a spreader and I always sharpen them up a little bit before starting. Just take a block plane, good and sharp. I'll just make sure I'm knocking any junk off. Soften the edge a little tiny bit. My usual method for wetting out fiberglass cloth is to pour epoxy onto my surface and then spread it out using a plastic trowel. And this works perfectly good on a horizontal surface. However, as soon as I'm applying glass onto a hull, that becomes more difficult. And so I've recently been switching over to using a roller for applying the epoxy to the cloth. I don't want to shift the cloth, that's the thing. You start shifting your cloth and wrinkles will start getting introduced. It'll be a nightmare. So just letting the roller roll. I'm barely hanging onto the roller here, basically. I'll continue applying the epoxy with the roller until the cloth looks like it's just about saturated through. Then I'll switch to a plastic trowel to work it in the rest of the way and distribute the excess epoxy to areas of cloth that look dry. Properly saturated fiberglass cloth should look very uniform, just ever so slightly glossy without looking dry and without seeing any epoxy pooling on the surface. Alright, so I've got my tape wetted out and it's pressed down such that it's bonding to the material below and it's not floating, and I've squeezed out all the excess off the surface. So now I got the peel ply, and what I found before is I tried to lay it down and kind of smooth it all out, and I found that I was getting wrinkles in the peel ply pretty easily. So I think I need to lay it down slowly and try and squeeze it out as I lay it down. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Just use a clamp to pin it down there. Now the peel ply can sort of stretch a little bit, and I'm not too sure how to address that. So what I'm just going to try and do is just try and lay it down nice and flat and still quite new to using peel plies or release fabrics. And so, like with any product, it can take a while before you figure out the best methods of application for it. And this is no exception. I'm finding the trickiest part to get the cloth laying down nice and flat without any wrinkles in it. And once wrinkles are in it, I'm finding it very difficult to get rid of them. So if you worked with peel ply a lot and you know some tricks that I can use to do this job better, please let me know in the comments. I'm holding back from the inside just a tiny little bit. I went like right to the corner on my first round up here, and I found my peel ply was getting buried in with the glass, and I had a bit of a rustle getting it out. So hopefully this will work a little bit better. It's already looking better, laying it down like this. This peel ply comes in either these like 9-inch wide strips that are like, I can't remember how long, 8 feet long or something like that, or they come in rolls. Okay, so now the idea is we put more resin on top of the peel ply and we do the exact same thing. We add enough that we can screed it all out. Got a little bit left in my tray here. Gonna have to go mix up some more though. And I don't usually add resin with a roller because I'm always worried about it picking up the glass itself and making a mess out of things, but I did this time around and I think it worked quite nicely. I just had to be very gentle with rolling it down, like you're not pressing, you're just sort of barely touching the cloth and letting the resin lay itself. Probably get rid of these now. Yeah, that's it. That plays out my tray. So I think I'm going to need, it's always hard to guess. I'm going to guess only about 3 or 4 shots to wet this out. But what we do is we move this epoxy through the cloth until the cloth itself is nice and flat and it's got a, you can see that it's fully saturated. I can see a couple little air bubbles in here. So it's going to need another coat. But just like laying down the cloth, the fiberglass cloth, as I understand it, you do the same thing with the peel ply, pressing it down firmly but not pulling all the epoxy out of it. And of course, always work clean, so a few drops here or there, get them while you can. Okay, well the peel ply is on, it's all laid down, it looks good. I think I got enough epoxy on here. I'm afraid of putting too much on and having it all float. Alright, this is all set up. Now let's see how the peel ply works. So the trick with this peel ply is just getting it started without pulling any glass off at the same time. No, I'll have to go to the other end. Okay, so there's our glass. There's our peel ply. So the idea is you get this going. You can see how this peel ply doesn't adhere to the glass. So it leaves this nice textured finish. Now there might be a few strands of peel ply that get caught in the edge, and that's one thing that I was trying to find a good way to avoid. It feels like I gotta come along with a scraper and just kind of scrape that inside corner a little bit. Cue the asper. Well, damn it, I screwed up. So yesterday, I got this plank glassed, got the peel ply on, and I had every intention of coming down a few hours later in the evening and trimming off the excess glass. But wouldn't you know it, it was a Workshop Wednesday. Workshop Wednesday is when I go over to my friend Paul's place and we screw around with machining projects. So I totally spaced out on coming down here and taking care of this before I went to bed. So that means I got a whole bunch of epoxy that I scraped out that is peeled over the edge of the plank here. And I can already feel there's a few lumps where it just didn't want to flatten out because of the shape of the planking. So I'm going to have a bit of a cleanup to do on here. I hope it isn't too bad. And my glass has glued itself to the plank above up here too, which is annoying. It's not the end of the world because I had a whole bunch of work I needed to do on this anyway. I mean, these surfaces were not 100% complete. They were going to get sanded out. They were probably going to get a little bit of fairing done to them with some fairing filler, and then probably get another coat of epoxy over top of the whole thing. But you know, every little bit. So let's peel this off and see how bad it is. I start here. Yeah, I can start here. And that looks better than the last one. I'm struggling. I'm trying to figure out how much epoxy to apply and then how much epoxy to take away. It's really hard to judge. Yeah. Oh, maybe I'll luck out. Maybe I'll luck out. Look at that. Because this is West System 207 hardener. It's like a slow hardener. And so it's still just a bit pliable. So it looks like, I mean, I don't know how easily I can cut this free with a knife. I'll try it. Let's see. Well, I mean, there's certainly some glass there that I need to fair out, or some epoxy, but all in all, that's not too bad. The ideal time to trim back epoxy saturated fiberglass cloth is right about the time that the epoxy has gelled and become dry to the touch, but is still very flexible. That's usually somewhere around 6 hours after you've applied the epoxy, depending on the temperature and the type of hardener you've used. So where I lucked out is that I did this all in the afternoon, so that by the time I was done it was about 4 o'clock, which means that it hasn't had, you know, it's only had so long to cure. If I had done it in the morning and had a few more hours, I probably wouldn't be able to do this. So lesson learned, I suppose. A couple lessons learned. Now I know some of you out there are getting your kink on at me cutting back this fiberglass cloth, so we'll do a little bit more of that before moving on. I don't bother trying to trim it too close because after it cures, I'm just going to come back with a fairing board and just sand that all back to a nice fair edge. And then we're going to get a fillet of epoxy going in there. It'll get sanded out, and then an unthickened coat of epoxy over the whole thing in order to bring it all together and make sure everything's sealed up. That looks really good. So on the inside edge here, there's a little bit of sort of few strands from the peel ply that remain behind. So I just take a little scraper and try and scrape those back. Get rid of any big lumps. I've only applied fiberglass to the first 4 planks of this boat, which brings it to just above the waterline amidships. And the reason we've put fiberglass on here is because this boat is going to live on a mooring. And so the fiberglass is going to make it easier to maintain the bottom paint that'll be on this boat. And also it's going to be used on and off a beach that's very rocky with lots of barnacles and oyster shells. And both of those are extremely aggressive on a wooden boat's hull. And so adding the fiberglass does add extra time and expense to the build, but it's going to be made up for in the long term with having much more robust bottom that we don't have to worry about. So I think in general, using the peel ply adds some cost and some waste, but it's certainly made putting this down and getting it to this point faster for sure. So all in all, I think each side was like an hour of work getting that glass down, screeding it out, getting the peel ply on, doing all that leveling, compared to the time it would have taken if I had to like come back and do a bunch of fill coats on this. This definitely was faster. So I'm happy about that. The finish is pretty good. We'll have to give it a sand, and you know, it might take a final coat floated over the top before we're ready for paint. That's fine. I don't mind that. I really like using this method. Okay, I hope you found that inspirational. I've always found experimentation is the best way to solve problems, and I think we did a pretty good job solving the problem of fiberglassing lapstrake planking. We used a whole bunch of Great West System products to do this. We used their 733 6-inch wide fiberglass tape. We used their 879 release fabric in order to make it go a little bit faster and to get better results. And of course, we've used their flagship product, the 105 Resin, and my favorite for wetting out glass, their 207 Hardener. West System make a great range of products. And don't forget the user manual and their online selection guides can be a real help in the workshop as well. So go check those out. Okay, folks, until next time, get out into the workshop, put on some rubber gloves and get sticky. Ciao.